X-Men the Animated Series and X-Men 97 panel, everyone, officially. We're so lucky to get this big of a group together. I think Rhode Island's the only other time we've had this many X-Men in one place, celebrating the front-running Emmy position of the show, which is fantastic after all these years, and also the Gotham acknowledgement for the show. What's it been like to go from the fan letters that nobody knew about until Julia Leewald goes into Fox to now seeing all this on Twitter and Instagram? We have quite a few of these folks on social media now. Kathy doesn't do it, but everybody else is dipping their toes in. George, you've not done the social media. This is still George's camera, by the way. He likes the classic. But Beast, as you know, is a technical wizard, so don't doubt that he can just get on the email and do everything. He's got that down. But what's the reaction been for all of you? George, I'll start with you, coming back and seeing this online flurry.
Well, it's a mind-blowing experience. We never thought that we would be here 30 years later, sitting in front of fans talking about our new show. And it was something that we bantered about when we were doing the original reunions down in Texas and small shows. And wouldn't it be nice if we could come back and do X-Men again? And it was kind of like a pipe dream. And then when we finally got the call that it was going to really, really happen, it was one of the most mind-blowing experiences that I'd ever experienced, and I've had a few. So, and again, and we have to thank you again for that. Yeah. Because if it were not for you and your loyalty, we would not be here today. So again, thank you from the bottom of my heart for everything you've done.
For Kathy and Lenore, you both had incredible success elsewhere. Lenore in politics, Kathy, The Good Witch was an outstanding success from the films to then the series. What was it like when, Lenore, you're exiting the political arena and this show is back, and then Kathy, for you, to now be back doing Disney animation?
You want to go first?
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I would agree with George. Mind-blowing is definitely the first word that comes to my mind. But I'm going to harken back to, again, that 5 years ago, which I mentioned earlier before you got here, Byron, when we first met Larry Houston and we met the Leewalds for the very first time. And we all were at this Comic-Con, and at the end of it, we got along so well. We went out for dinner, we had a really nice dinner, and we said, wouldn't it be nice if somebody was to buy the rights to the X-Men, the animated series, and reboot the show and bring us with it. Yes. And we were like, yeah, wouldn't that be nice? It's like, yeah, you know, how often does that ever happen, right? Right? And then we said, well, let's drink to that and we'll put it out there to the universe. And we'll put it out there to the universe. So we did. We did a toast. We put it out there to the universe. Yes, we did. And you said, yeah, it was like lightning in a bottle. Mm-hmm. And then the next thing you know, fast forward 5 years later, somebody bought the rights, yes. Disney. Yeah. They rebooted the show, and they asked us to come back. And so we are so grateful and appreciative to be here and have this opportunity and to actually meet our fans this time around, yeah. Which we didn't get to do the first time. So it's been really overwhelming experience, and we love you all, and you're all so kind and thoughtful, and we love your stories. We love hearing about what the show meant to you as kids and what it means to the kids now, the new kids that are getting to watch it. So thanks again for being here and being our fans for so long. Appreciate it.
I would, this is weird, there we go. I would echo Lenore. Gratitude is probably the word that pops into my mind the most. And I think I've always said Lewald. Did they say Leewald? I don't know. It's one of those names that you kind of don't say to their faces because I'm not sure which it is. So in my mind, but about 5 years ago when Eric was doing that first book, right, and maybe 6 years ago now, and he called me and we had this long 2.5-hour conversation. I'd never actually met him in person, and we kind of rehashed the whole story and the X-Men, and he said, you know, we've been trying to reboot this. With Larry, we've wanted to for years. We've been talking about it. And all of this bureaucratic, company nonsense was standing in everyone's way. Yeah. And so it really is gratitude. I've always done on camera, but I've always done cartoons. I've always done animation. It's kind of been my go-to side job. Alyson Court here, who I've known for years, we're all like, deep animation gals. So I'm just very grateful to have this. I've never had to have another job other than as an actor, because as an actor you do everything. So I did on camera, but I always did animation, and that's really you get to be in your comfy shoes, and a lot of the time they want you to be funny, you know, and add to the script. Not an X-Men, but you know, other cartoons. So yeah, I think just gratitude to the fans. Honestly, I've only been going to cons for about a year and a half. And I didn't really realize the impact of even the original show until I started coming to cons and listening to people's stories. I mean, I knew it was popular in the day, but I didn't really understand why until I heard about the way it touched everybody. And that was the great thing about that original cartoon. It was so well written. And it was aimed at kids, but really it was aimed up here. And everybody absorbed these big lessons about big ethical issues that they didn't even realize that they were absorbing in a very fun, you know, Saturday morning kind of way. So I rewatched it in 2020 when it first started streaming on Disney, and I was blown away by how the writing stands up after 30 years. Really blown away, Larry, by your work. And how many things can you watch 30 years later and have it still have the same impact and be impressed by it? So that's up to these guys. That's because of Larry and the Lawalds, frankly. Anyway, so thank you. We're all very grateful.
I'm going to stay down at that end because I'd love to hear about your overlap between recording X-Men and also the Resident Evil games, because you're both starring ladies in one of the most popular franchises of all time.
Go ahead, Claire.
Claire Redfield, may we hear the story? Were you already past Beetlejuice when Resident Evil call came in? How was that on timeline?
We actually ended up getting the connection with Capcom because of the X-Men video game.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah,
98, right? And RE2 was 98 and RE3 was 99.
but recorded in 97.
Oh, right, so 97, 98.
It was when Capcom came to Toronto because they were making the Marvel vs. Capcom game and they wanted to use the voice actors from the cartoon. That was kind of the big incentive. And they used as many of us as they could, I think. So that was Capcom's first foray into the Toronto voice actor scene. So they made a relationship with the studio where we recorded X-Men. It was then Sounds Interchange, then it became Dave, and then Technicolor, and now it's Streamland or whatever it's called.
It's called 49 Ontario.
Yeah, like it's been through a lot of different names, but it's the same studio that we recorded Beetlejuice and everything way back when. So I lived there. I grew up at that location. So the X-Men video game gave Capcom that opportunity to get to know Toronto voice actors, all of us. And they liked the studio, they liked the engineer, they liked Susan Hart, who was the record assistant for X-Men when we were recording that show. So a relationship was established, and that's why Capcom came back and auditioned for Resident Evil 2 there. That was the first one. And then they just stayed there for a while and made Resident Evil 3 and Code Veronica. And then we did a bunch of other games like Devil May Cry and Onimusha and all that stuff. It might have been because the producer was now married to me, but anyway, not that that had anything to do with it.
Didn't have anything to do with how I got there. I just want to make that perfectly clear.
So, yeah, Capcom did a lot of games in Toronto, but it was all because, so this is your Jill Valentine in, you know, Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, and I was your Claire Redfield in, what was it, Resident Evil 2, Code Veronica, Dark Side Chronicles, Operation Raccoon City, the Mercenaries game, and the Degeneration movie. And all of that is because, initially, the X-Men video game.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you.
Larry, your tentacles reach far in the ocean. And speaking of the high seas, Adrian, video game talk, BAFTA nomination for Assassin's Creed 3, mocap, 60 billion opening week or month. It was
How much did you get paid, Adrian?
40 billion, no. Pennies, Canadian.
It's been, you know, it's been fun to see the fans come up for that in addition to Nightcrawler, but you know, they talk about glow up these days. That's a new kid term. You know, you're blossoming. So you went from one amazing episode in the original show and now you're a mainstay in the cast, a swashbuckling, tail-swinging sword fighter, and people are loving it. So what has it been like to revisit the character in such an expansive role?
Well, I mean, it was, first of all, it was my very first animated audition to play the Nightcrawler. I did I was playing Germans and Russians and English people. So Germans and Russians and Brits, that was my on camera. And I did a few voice things, and then my agent teamed up with a voice agent who said, hey, do you have anybody who could do a German accent? And then my agent said, this guy. And so I went in, and I think the main note was, we just don't want Colonel Klink from Hogan's Heroes. Hogan? I didn't want that. But I'd learned a German accent from a real German fellow from Berlin, and he had this sort of very light sort of German when he talked to me, and everything was very light. And so when I saw the script, I went, okay, I know what that is. And it just was one of those moments where what you can do matches with what's being asked, and something wonderful happened. And then, so I did 2 episodes back then, which meant that, 2 episodes, 2 days, I was in the studio with Cal and Lenore, and were you there, Alyson? Maybe Alyson was there too, once or twice. Anyway, it's a long time ago.
Yes, the second cameo, you hold Jubilee or you guys' shoulders.
That's right. Anyway, so, and then 6 years ago, I said to my voice agent, because I wanted to be up for a big animation movie, and because I thought it was a reach, right? And I said, well, just tell him I was a Nightcrawler in the original X-Men. And he goes, nobody cares about a 25-year-old cartoon. Adrian. Anyway, so he's a great agent, but who knew? Anyway, so about a year and a half, 2 years ago, he forwards an email saying Adrian may recognize these lines, and it was the lines from the Nightcrawler episode, in which I played the Australian skier.
I know, I had you sign my cell, also Australian skier.
Right. Anyway, so
not pictured.
Anyway, so yeah, so just having it come back and having the conventions and meeting fans and people who were kids then, who now have kids who are watching it with them, it's just been absolutely wild and fantastic, and it's nice to be back. And the character is developed from the heartless fools to meine Freunde, and to all that stuff. So no, mein Freund, nein, and all that stuff. It's great.
Chris, your character's developed a lot. He's gotten even meaner. Mr. Sinister is back.
Meaner? How dare you?
I think the work with the baby monitor effect when Bo and the sound team had,
I love that moment.
And your performance there was great.
Yeah, that was a splendid moment.
And you went full method. You bought a baby monitor at home for a week before that, and really tried to make sure Gwyneth was on her toes.
Yeah, I thought that was really quite brilliant. That whole
the original
Jean
show
Grey and everything.
had very little explanation on cable except some images Gene saw in his mind that Larry had teed up. But I think for Chris Potter's version of Cable, it's just so rich how we saw him as a child being born, and then your infusion of the future that he would, inhabit and become. So it really made us feel an emotional connection to the character, whereas before he was sort of a gruff butt kicker to keep it PG.
Well, his that whole episode when he was Nathaniel Essex and trying to find a cure for his very sick wife, I think that was terrific.
Season 5, probably the best episode of season 5.
Yeah, Descent, it's called. And I thought that was, a fascinating explanation of that character and how he became Mr. Sinister. And so, and to bring in Charles Darwin.
I was just thinking that too.
It was, I thought, brilliant. But
I like when you teamed up with Beast and fought the Phalanx off. That was fun. Larry, you guys always had a good job of pairing folks off. Or even in the Mojo episode, Rogue and Beast again were paired up. That was fun. I liked how you would play with the combinations. Was there any discussion about each season which characters you wanted to see? I mean, you have the arcs of the story, but in certain fights, obviously, you're very thoughtful about staging. And I'm just curious, as a fan, what staging shots you wanted that weren't necessarily related to the script or the plot.
Well, a lot of times when I spoke with the writers, we tried to pair up personalities and superpowers so that they would complement each other as opposed to being the same person with the same abilities, so that each character could shine in their own way in every situation. And so that once I got the writers to understand that, they started writing situations better for everybody to work on. And if the writers didn't write it, then I kind of just redrew it the way it should be. I was a little subversive that way.
Well, you did a great job with it, and you gave Storm so many looks, and in the new season, Alyson gets 2 badass looks
Yes.
all the way through, and then the life-death arc, you got to voice your own worst enemy. It was amazing to hear your voice with the effects and Storm dueling this demon. I'm very curious, what was the thought when you read, okay, Storm got zapped and she's on a bus out of town, oh God, and then you get this great arc after that, but it's like, when the scripts come in one at a time, you can feel very vulnerable or wondering.
Extremely, like, what is going on? I mean, come on, it's episode 2, people. I've barely gotten going, and yes, and as you said, we don't have the whole season arc. We're a lot like you, the same way that you were waiting week by week to see what was going to happen. We're sitting there going, when's the next script going to come? When's the next script going to come? I'm not in it. There's no script. I don't understand.
They don't even send me the scripts I'm not in.
Yeah. So yes, I was really shocked when I saw what the arc was going to be, and that I was going to get a chance to do both characters in episode 6, and she starts at the end of the episode 4, and it's an actor's dream, and they handled it really nicely because I did the adversary first. And a good long time passed before I got a chance to do the Storm part of it. So when I went into the studio, Storm was not in my head at all. I was just having fun with this villain. And, after all of Storm's tight control that she has all of the time, it was just fun. She was just, the episode was just lots and lots of fun. And then it was quite a while after that we got back, but it was a gift to me as an actor, and I really enjoyed it. But yes, I did have a couple of weeks, maybe even months there when I was going, well, it was nice. Being an Omega level threat, acknowledged for the first time and then gone. But yes, I'm really glad they brought it.
Hearing that voice again, I think we should double cast you as Lady Macbeth and then one of the witches. I think that could be cool.
Ooh, now that would be interesting.
And Alyson, what was great about your character is you're playing another Jubilee with punk rock biker vibes, and she saves the day, and really, she's already got a toy out. You talk about a win. We're still waiting on the Storm Funko, Disney.
I think it's funny that Absissa, one episode, she has her own Funko and everything. And I'm still waiting on a Claire Redfield Funko. I'm waiting on a Lydia Funko. I'm waiting on a Lunette Funko. Come on, people, where are the toys?
There's no Claire Funko?
There's not. Right, thank you.
We gotta get on that, Larry. You need to dial up Funko. What would you say has been your most memorable fan encounter from the conventions? I'd like to start with you, George, since I'll hand you the mic. But if there's something that comes to mind that you just heard a really detailed story about a collection, or maybe something more personal.
Well, mine would have to be something very personal, because I had somebody come up to the table in one of the very early cons that we did, when I was still unaware of how much impact the show had on people. And a grown man broke down in tears when he came to my table. And first of all, just, you want to come meet me and you're crying? This is I'm just an ordinary guy. And then he explained to me the problems that he had growing up and how he found his refuge in our show, and specifically in the character that I was portraying. And it was such a moving experience to me that as an actor, something that I did as a job would mean so much to another human being, that he would be that emotionally moved when he came to meet me. And that's something that I will always carry with me as one of the greatest rewards of the career that I've had for the last 54 years. And I can't think of anything more moving. So that was mine.
I feel like we're going to get into a one-off of greatest stories now down the whole line. So I'm just going to ask, does anybody else would like to volunteer one that comes to mind instead of putting everybody on the spot?
Well, mine is a lot like George's. I've had people come up to me, and you know, Storm means a lot to a lot of people, but within the Black community especially, in terms of just not having role models, not having voices that you can claim, that you are proud to claim. And I've had the same thing where people come up and they are in tears, grown men, and you're a little taken aback because sometimes in our community, in the Black community, we don't tend to let our weaknesses and our vulnerabilities show. History has taught us that it's better if we don't. And to see that level of appreciation, that level of caring, to understand that, you know, it's nice that they're coming up to me, but it's not Alyson they're talking about. They're talking about Storm and the way that Storm was conceived and built and written, and that's you. And that is what they were holding on to, and that has meant the world to me, to be able to lend my voice and the talents that I have to a character like that means that much to my community.
I don't think anyone can follow that. That's so beautiful. But I will tell you, a story. About 11 years ago, when Assassin's Creed 3 came out, I got invited to my first convention in Detroit, YomaCon, and one of the handlers was this, I guess in his mid-20s, and he was Chilean American, and he was really nice. He dressed up as one of the video game characters, and sometimes, and at the bar, I think on a Saturday night, and he'd been in his cups. Everyone was in their cups, except for me. I was so good. But he comes, stands next to me, and he says, "There's something I have to tell you." And he starts to well up in tears, and he goes, "When I was a boy, I came here, I was 6 years old, and my mother used to put me in front of Saturday morning cartoons because she had to work and do all the stuff around the house, and that's how I learned English." And I never thought of the impact of a show that has these stories and all these voices. And anyway, that's my story.
I'm going to change the mood here. Yesterday, a gentleman came out to me and he said, "You know, I watched the original series when I was much younger, of course, 30 years ago. And I'm re-watching the series and the new series with my girlfriend. And every time Mr. Sinister comes on, well, the first time he came on, his girlfriend said, 'He scares the hell out of me. He's so creepy.' And every time my character would come on, she would snuggle up to him. So the story is going. So he would.
Afraid.
He was very grateful. Mr. Sinister appearing in the show.
He's here, me too.
Don't snuggle up.
So you're an aphrodisiac.
We'll have to think of a better name than Mr. Sinister for you after this. I just very quickly, the one sentence that sticks in my brain is that somebody came up to me and said, and the first sentence out of their mouth was, "When I was in foster care as a child, the only thing that we all looked forward to was Saturday mornings. And it was the whole Fox Kids lineup, but he said especially the X-Men. So I always remember that when you start a sentence, when I was in foster care, and this is what, so it means a lot to a lot of people. I just want to say to Alyson, when we first auditioned for this show many years ago, I auditioned for Storm, and I remember, I didn't know anything about the X-Men, so I kind of went and kind of looked up and looked at the picture of Storm and went, I don't think this is really a good idea, but I'll do it, because, I don't want to tell the casting director. So I don't actually remember auditioning for Jean, but I actually, because it had such a great monologue for Storm, maybe they were just using the monologue. Maybe nobody ever intended that I was going to actually audition for it, but it might have just been the monologue. But yes, obviously, who could play it but you, is what I think.
Yeah, it'd be great.
That voice, that Shakespearean authority.
Lenore, do you have a story?
Yeah, I skipped over.
Okay, you go first.
I was just gonna. So I don't wanna go into the other area because I have my glasses, but I want to do a panel where I don't cry. I would like to do. So anyway, obviously, like with Comfy Couch, there's a whole different level of stories in there. That so I did a lot of charity work with Buffalo and the Bills in the whole Niagara and upper Western New York and the Toronto GTA area. We did a lot of charity stuff together. So over the years, there have been a lot of Wish Kids and various situations so having the opportunity to do that has been incredible. But with X-Men, I think one of my favorite things is that my cousin, who's 10 years younger than me, so he was 8 when the show first came out, and that was the first thing that I guess I was working on that blew his mind. And he kept his VHS tapes, the 2-part The Night of the Sentinels tapes. He held onto them as a little boy. And then when I had a child, he gave them to me so that my son could watch them. And now he has 2 boys, and his firstborn son is named Logan. And Larry's wife wants to kidnap him because he's so beautiful. And they came to meet these guys at the Toronto Comic-Con back in March, and he was just blown away being able to talk to you, Larry. So it's just watching that cycle and that journey, and there is no greater joy as a parent. It's even better than when you experience it as a kid, but as a parent, getting to introduce your child to the things that you loved, it's the greatest gift. So thank you, because I'm going through the original series and now the new one with my stepkids who are 10 and 13, so I'm getting to relive that again. It's just such a wonderful journey.
Your eyes
Thank
are
you.
watering.
Shut up.
I'll just make a quick one, but I'll tell you, the thing that we hear over and over again, which is really heartwarming, is when folks say, "You made my childhood." I think we've all heard that. And many of the stories we do hear are kids who felt different one way or another. They felt like they didn't fit in, or they were lonely or shy, or maybe picked on in school for various reasons. And they said that they would rush home from school or on a Saturday morning, get up at 7:30 and, watch our show. And it made them feel safe. And it made them feel it's okay to be different. And in fact, isn't that a great thing? And so, one of the episodes that I did in the original show was called The Cure, where Rogue goes to Muir Island to get rid of her powers because she wants to be normal like everybody else, so that she can be intimate and have maybe a family or have love with Remy, but she finds out through that episode that it's really her special powers that make her unique and make her who she is, and that she has to embrace them, and she has to embrace herself and accept herself for who she is. And at the end of that episode, she says, "Yeah, I reckon I am my powers and the good they can do, and I reckon I can live with that, because there ain't no cure for who you are." And I would like to add, nor should there be. So, yeah.
There's been other attempts to do the X-Men this good that have never materialized as good. They've been enjoyable, but never as good. And I think these voices are the benchmark. And there's great actors everywhere, but nobody can ever surpass the work you guys did. But to echo what Kathy said, I don't think anybody else can ever play Storm.
Right.
And you know, and Lenore had over 400 people seen for Rogue before she went in. So clearly, you're looking at rare talent here, folks. And they're just a wonderful group when they get together, and they love to see the fans out here. We'd love to see you guys back at the tables, also for some group photo ops coming up. But I wanted to turn it over for a few questions before we wrap up. If you want to raise your hand, I'll come out. All right, gentlemen, right here.
Hi. Was there a specific part of the new show you wish they had touched on, like maybe touched a little longer on, per se?
Actually, I'm going to say something. Life Death originally was supposed to be longer. It was supposed to be more about Storm and Forge, right? And then, but the powers that be kind of nixed that and made it half and half with Mojo and with Jubilee stuff. But I really would have loved to see more about Forge and Storm. I would like to see way more of them going into that. And maybe in the future they will. I certainly hope so.
Kathy, how did you feel about what they've done with Jean? I mean, you went from being the Phoenix to being the clone, I mean, there was it seemed like Jean can never get a break. I mean, she gets married and the priest was fake, yeah, more.
Well, I don't actually play Jean in X-Men 97. I play Val Cooper in X-Men 97. Yeah, Jean's kind of been through the ringer, hasn't she, Larry, over the years?
Yeah. A lot of times with Jean is actually quite powerful, and if we use her full extent in every story, the story would end like on page 5. So we basically had to tone her down just so that we could get through the storyline, because you had the power to take everybody out with her telling that.
Well, I know, and I think, so when people, my son, I tell this story because my son couldn't wait to show me that compilation of, on the internet of Jean falling down and the noises that she makes. I was sort of horrified, had no idea when you put them all together that's what it sounded like. But at the same time, I was saying to Larry earlier, people asked these questions, and she really was the emotional center of the X-Men. She took on everybody's pain,
yes,
and she was overwhelmed by it. And that scene where she's flying with the crystal in the original series up to the sun, and to her certain demise, she thinks. And her line was something, I'm going to misquote myself, but it was in the script, but it was something like, "Oh, Scott, it's so beautiful. The light, it's so beautiful. Oh, Scott, I wish you could see it." So even though she's about to die, she's taking in the beauty, and that's Jean to me.
Yeah. That's her.
Yeah. But why didn't somebody tell me early on that that's what I sounded like when I was
Back then, nobody had compiled all of your scenes together. They didn't have that. There's no internet stuff, no social media stuff.
There was one really funny, remember the Stonehenge one? They were all at Stonehenge, and there's like a bunch of fighting going on in the foreground, and I was rewatching it, and you see Jean run in the top left-hand corner. She's like this big. She runs in, takes 2 steps, falls down, and then someone runs in, picks her up, and runs away with her. That was like, okay.
Referencing the Phoenix Saga, that was an amazing moment of self-sacrifice. And I also think, Larry, I'm curious if this was adapted from the comic or if this was a scene that you guys staged. But as the ship is coming back into the atmosphere, they're trying to decide who's going to pilot it in the non-heat shield protection. And Jean takes it upon herself to lock the door, basically gas everybody.
Right.
They were all trying to get to the door to stop her. And she's piloting this, taking in the heat, and that's when the Phoenix meets her. But that, to me, was probably the most gripping scene in animation. Was so good. Was that in the comic?
A variation. In the comics, it was totally different because the Phoenix entity in the comic books became, the corruption corrupted Jean. And for television, we created Jean and Phoenix as 2 separate entities. And so Jean was taking on the responsibility of taking over the shuttle to come back to Earth. So she was sacrificing herself. willingly, but this entity was separate and came and took over her body and gave her her power. So that was original for us for the TV show. So that was something we did quite different.
Yeah, that whole saga, you did that took 9 episodes.
Yeah.
You couldn't do that today, could you?
No, I mean, and that's what I think makes why they really can't do a good Dark Phoenix movie, is that we had 9.5 hours to show the ascent of her powers and then the corruption of the powers. So it takes time to build up the character into being a hero, and then absolute power corrupting, absolutely.
Wasn't the original comic one like over the course of like 10 years or something like that? They built up like slowly throughout all of the comics. I think it was like a total of 10 years that they put in the scenes of the Phoenix saga.
You could be right. I'm not sure how many years it was, but I know that when the writers wrote that once Jean killed a son and then killed all these population of plant people, that's when the editor, Jim Shooter, said no, because they were going to try and lobotomize her, and said no. That's when Jim Shooter told her, no, she's got to die for that, what she did. And so that's what we did in our show, that Jean dies, but the Phoenix, being a separate entity, brings her back to life again.
Hi, I've been a big fan of X-Men. I recently got back into X-Men when it was on Disney Plus, so I actually watched the whole entire season, and I'm about to get to the new one. So, my questions to you is, when it came to coming back to the X-Men series, were there any thoughts on how to bring the character back to life after being gone from that character so many years?
Sorry, I'm going to say one of the things that we had to keep in mind, all of us, was that when the new show starts, X-Men 97, it's only really like a few weeks or a month after the last episode called Graduation Day, which is the last episode of the 5th season of the original show. So we had to be very cautious in trying to make sure that we sounded the same as we did then. And so that it was kind of a seamless transpiration into that new season. And sometimes interviewers will say, well, did you have to go through a lot of things, or did Rogue go through a lot of things before this next season? I'm like, no, she's the same. She goes through the stuff in the new season, but before that, there's just so little time that has been supposed to be passed that really our main thing was just to make it seamless. Right, something like that. Yeah, Lilandra took him off a little while ago.
But of course, for us as actors, it had been a whole lot of time. So, I mean, I must admit, yes, I was nervous. I've been doing this for a long time, so you try to tell yourself, look, you auditioned and they wanted you for it, so you must be still doing something right, and it didn't matter. I was I was in the Uber heading to the studio, and I was terrified. It's like, it's been so long, like, do I know her again? I've read the script, but am I going to be able to do it? And all of those doubts, the adversary was in my head. What can I say? And I remember the Uber pulls up in front of this place, and I go, oh my God, it looks familiar. And then I walk in, and it's the exact same studio that I had been recording in 25 years ago, doing the same role. And I just thought, okay, it's going to be okay. And you walk in, and there's the music stand, and there's the script, and you open your mouth, and you hope for the best. And thank goodness Storm came out.
Yeah.
But yes, I did doubt myself for a little while, just because so much time had passed for me, so much life had happened for me, and I knew that I was picking up a character, and it was only, whatever it was, a month in the character's life and 25 years in mine. And yes, I think it's a testament to the strength of the character that was written back in the original and the writing of X-Men 97, and that's what makes it easy, because if the character is well drawn and if the writing is strong, then as an actor all you've got to do is go with it. And so that's what we did.